we think we are our body, we think we are our mind, and this couldn't be more delusional and further from the truth. So I've been getting harassed by some of you telling me to do a video on my bookshelf and go through each of the books that I've read and share a little bit of the value that I have gleaned from some of them. And whilst that is a very good idea for a video, it would take far too long to divulge and begin to share the nuance of each particular text. I thought I would do a top 5 today, and these are in no particular order, and hopefully I'll give you a little bit of the lessons learned, what it's about, why you should read it, where you are in your life when I think you should read it, and yeah, hopefully it's an interesting read. I'd love to know if you've seen them. If you would have any recommendations for me to read or perhaps do videos on, please share them in the comments below. My book recommendations on Twitter always go down a storm. So I'm going to begin with number 1. So number 1 is a book by Napoleon Hill, and no, it's not Think and Grow Rich. It is Outwitting the Devil, which is a far superior text. Now, I first read this book probably about 2 years ago, and it's one of those books that is so interestingly laid out that I keep coming back to it, and I use it as a constant reminder to keep me on track. So the premise of the book is Napoleon had a premonition, you could say, or some kind of materialization in which he had an interview with the devil himself. Now, whether or not this event actually took place, nobody really knows. But he got the opportunity to ask the devil a series of questions on the account that he would be honest and truthful about his work in the world. And one of the big take-homes about this particular book and the interview with the devil is this idea of drifters. So, and I often say this, that the devil personified is not this horned red demon that seeks to give people cancer and is the cause of all the tyranny in the world, but he is merely an absence of God, or if you don't like that word, an absence of consciousness, of conscious decision making in your life, of control, you could say. And there's a term that is prefaced very early in this book called drifters, and that his work primarily involves is primarily done by people who are drifting off course, who are moving into a state of unconsciousness, who are just letting life kind of pull them this way and that way, and they have no jurisdiction, they have no will of their own. And whenever I feel in that particular way that I'm not grabbing life by the wheel, per se, I'm moving into that drifting that category, and the devil's being, let's say, manifested through my lack of consciousness. They often say that the idle hands are the devil's work, and that is really the premise of this book. So if you haven't read this book, highly recommend it. Fascinating and easy read. It's kind of laid out, you kind of have questions and answers here, and yeah, it's a very it's a very different take on cliche self-improvement books, and it offers a perspective of not what is the right thing to do or how do I improve my life, how do I grow. It's how do I avoid hell? How do I avoid the devil? How do I avoid suffering? So this is Napoleon's best work by far. Okay, let's go on to number 2. Number 2 is a very different kind of book. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. And this is by Bessel van der Kolk. I believe it was a Dutch psychiatrist, I want to say. Apologies if I don't have your profession correct. But this book is a very fascinating read because it's on PTSD, it's on post-traumatic stress disorder, and the kind of mind and body connection. And this book really transformed my way of thinking about how disease, suffering, pain, trauma starts presenting itself in people through this body and mind connection. One of the fascinating aspects of this book kind of shows us how we can get fragmented between what the mind is experiencing and what the body is also experiencing. So one of the key kind of take-homes from this book is that the nervous system doesn't know the difference between a real event that's happening now in front of you and an imagined event. So if you were to close your eyes and imagine a memory back in your past, your body will feel kinesthetically the feelings that were associated with that memory. So PTSD, for example, and this is not just solely down to, let's say, war trauma, but also sexual trauma, abuse trauma. The individuals that are suffering from this particular trauma, they are reliving the memory mentally. And because the body doesn't know the difference, the body doesn't know if it's sitting down in a consultation with a psychiatrist, if they're replaying that memory back, the body is experiencing that trauma firsthand. So the abuse, the nervous energy, the sweaty palms, the heat across the chest, the tension in the muscles. So the body is almost transported back into that trauma, into that abuse, and they are experiencing it in real time. One of the fascinating, I suppose, insights of this is, what if you could do this the other way? What if you could imagine an event in the future which hasn't happened yet? But if you can imagine that event so vividly, and the body can experience the, let's say, more pleasurable kinesthetic sensations of a dream life, of what it would be like to sit on a beach with a margarita, then what might that happen? Can you convince the body it's successful when it technically hasn't reached that point? And that begins to form the bedrock, the foundation of visualization, manifestation, law of attraction, that the body already feels like it's this million dollar owner or businessman or businesswoman, and then you'll proceed to do those actions and manifest that wealth towards you. So fascinating read. A little bit heavy, but this will change your way of thinking about people, trauma, and the mind and body connection. It's really, truly fascinating. Speaking of manifestation, I think this is a good little segue into book number 3, which is Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza. This is a very popular, I believe, as a neuroscientist, I believe he's a neuroscientist. He has some really fascinating work which is built upon the bedrock of some people like Maxwell Maltz, who also wrote the book Psycho-Cybernetics, which it follows the same kind of premise of the book. And essentially, if we go in the back of The Body Keeps the Score, it's this idea that with those mental visualizations, with meditation, with affirmations, you can condition the body to a new mind, to a new person, to a new identity, to a new personality. So if you're constantly waking up each morning dull, in apathy, suffering, depression, stress, you keep affirming those things in your life, and of course you're going to carry yourself through your day, through your 9 to 5, through your weekend as this person who is stuck in this apathy, in this suffering. But if you can take a moment, a little bit of space to consciously become the creator of your own reality, start to affirm positive things in your life, start to surround yourself in the environment that condition you to a new reality, a new mind, a new body, a new personality, then the body is just going to proceed through those paths. Remember, again, on the previous point, the body doesn't know the difference between a real event and an imagined event. So if you're constantly visualizing and affirming a dream life, the body is going to experience that in real time. And the way you do that is use reference points in your memories to create those positive experiences. So when you first got that bike, when you were a teenager, how you felt, any positive reference point you have, if you can extrapolate those feelings, because it's the feelings that is really important in visualization. The body is the let's say the transportation system or the tool that will allow yourself to be convinced of that new fact. This book goes in heavy depth about the effects of gamma meditation and dimethyltryptamine activation and kundalini awakening, and it's a truly fascinating read. There aren't many books that I've reread and start to learn new things every time I read this book, but The way to describe this book is everything you thought about the world but didn't know how to say. Can't recommend this book highly enough. It's revolutionary. It really is. Okay, let's bring us on to number four. Number four has to be Letting Go by David L. Hawkins, A Pathway to Surrender. His best book, in my opinion. I am still coming back and forth between Force versus Power, I believe it is. But this book really is his crown jewel. It's his map of the unconscious, of the conscious world. It's how he mapped. He found a way to scale emotions, and emotions are the language of the body. And if you understand how to communicate effectively with the body, then you can consciously start to undo some of the trauma that may have presented itself in your earlier life. So one of the famous scales, I believe I have tagged here at the back. And those of you who have read my course will know how powerful this kind of thing is. But this is the map of consciousness that Hawkins spent his life kind of creating. And this is a communication tool. A communication tool with your body, with the unconscious mind. Remember, your body is the unconscious mind. And if you are able to subtly understand the nuances of, the tightening in your stomach when you're feeling stress and anxiety, the tightness in your chest, tension in the muscles, in the musculature, and any of these, again, very subtle reflexes in the body where tension may lie, where stress may lie, and how to undo those, how to communicate with it. And if people knew of the scale and they knew how to talk to themselves consciously, remember, the body, we think we are our body, we think we are our mind, and this couldn't be more delusional and further from the truth. We have control, we have utility over these things. It's like, the analogy I would give is, your body is a car and the mind is the navigation system, but you are the driver of the car. People think they are the car, they think they are the navigation system. This is nonsense. The way to approach this is you have ownership over these things, and we are not considering let's say the trauma and stress and all the pain and suffering in the modern world is at a consequence of just not understanding the tools that we have, not understanding how to use the body, how to communicate with it, how to use the mind, how to quieten it. And this is the mechanism that allows you to do that with such intelligence, such intention. Sorry, I thought my camera cut out there for just a minute. Still good, brothers. Okay, last but not least, Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. Very, very different book to the other ones. This follows Paramahansa Yogananda, who was the devotee of Sri Yukteswar. And this is one, I think I mentioned this before, but this is one of the books that Steve Jobs actually had in his in his prized possessions. This really is a fascinating following of this yogi's life, and kind of from a Western perspective, especially, how they speak very nonchalantly about the powers that some of these Eastern mystics had, the ability to astral project and speak with the divine creator. It's really some very, very fascinating concepts in here. Stuff on Kriya Yoga, which is an energy kind of yoga, and how there are yogis that can live for 100, 200 years. It really is a look into a different world, especially if you are a Westerner. I know I have some Indian audiences here, but this really was a very humbling read, one of my favorite reads, and I haven't read this in a while. That's why I'm trying to remember a little bit, but it's fascinating. It really is, and you can get lost in this. I've read this very quickly as I remember, but it's I can't speak highly enough of this. If you want an insight into kind of Eastern culture, their understanding of some of their revered religious personalities, this is a fantastic read. It really is. I think this is due for another reread very, very soon. So, gentlemen, let me know which one of those books takes your interest. They're all 5-star books in my opinion. What I like to do with some of my 5-star books or the best reads are reread them. I would rather reread the best book 100 times than read 100 books, if that makes sense. And those are books which are going to be in my collection indefinitely. I did have a little skim off some of them before I moved to my new home down here in Bournemouth. But yeah, those ones are staples, I think, in people's libraries, especially if you're inclined to the spiritual life, developing your spiritual personality, developing yourself as an individual, self-improvement, all those kind of things. They should be on your wish list. Let me know if you've read any of those books, what you take away from them, lesson learned for people. We all like learning here, and if you can share some of the things that you've learned from those books, I think people in the comments would be very, very grateful. I will perhaps do some more from my library if people like these style of videos. I just think doing the whole library doesn't give enough credence. That's not the right word. Doesn't give enough to the books. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you subscribe to anything of what I've said, subscribe to me, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Take care, my friends.